Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to waste your time. In fact, I'm going to save us all some time and rank the bottom ones that we know for sure are garbage water first. So let's put Harry Potter and the Cursed Child right at the bottom, right where it belongs, right there. I sat through 10 minutes of this Broadway play and it just bored me. It is just so uninspired. It's so cash grab. It's everything wrong with the long-running media franchise, and I hate it for it, and you should hate it too. Say this list is inaccurate because I haven't watched it. Say I'm a hater. Whatever, I am not going to waste my time sitting through 90 minutes of this nonsense. Let's go to the next one. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. You see, the thing about this movie is it had a lot of hype around it, and it revitalized a lot of Harry Potter interest, and it definitely got the fans going again with the Wizarding World. I'll be the first one to say it. There was a lot of hype for this, and the hype was met. Maybe not in a satisfactory category, but it was met at least 70% of it. So for that reason, I'm gonna give this a C tier. This is a pretty hard movie to rank. However, it's inoffensive and it is entertaining. So yeah, I'm gonna put this smack down in the middle. Now, The Crimes of Grindelwald, the very next movie. This is an interesting point of topic because there is a great story here. Like, the story itself is so amazing. Wizards versus non-wizards. But the execution is done so poorly. Why are we focusing on Fantastic Beasts still when that is not the plot of this story? They're forcing these characters to be so important, and yet they're not. Even these characters know they're not important. They don't even want to be part of the story. Why not just tell what it is? Wizards against non-wizards, a whole revolution taking place. That is much more interesting than whatever Newton is doing right now. Now, with all those critiques out of the way, I still really enjoyed this movie. And the thing is, when I'm watching Harry Potter, I'm not watching it with this whole criticism mentality. I shut off my brain, and that was the best experience I had because it had so much action to it. It really did feel like a war was brewing, and it was setting up for this whole revolution. I have to put it on A tier. Hate me if you must, but the backstory was already laid work with the Harry Potter original series, and now the plot is just too amazing to ignore. Yeah, the execution's trash, the characters are very minute in terms of the whole grand scheme of things, but damn it, it's a fun ride, so I have to put it in A tier. Now, everything I said about this movie, make it to the sequel. I still watch it with my brain turned off. I still watch it enjoying the whole story grand scheme of thing. I still watch it hating the fact that we're not focusing on story, we're focusing on these characters. Hating the fact that we're focusing on animal capturing instead of the plot of a wizard revolution. And now it just drops 2 scales. I have to put this in the C tier. No matter how much I turn off my brain, I am not stupid. This plot makes 0 sense. These characters are more forced than any of the last 2 movies put together. So it feels like it just lost the plot somewhere along the line. Plot with everything, not just with these characters alone, but even with the grand scheme plot of a wizarding revolution. You know what? I'm upset. This deserves much more of a downgrade. I'm going to put it in D tier. Up next is The Sorcerer's Stone, where the franchise started it all. It is a cute movie. It is wholesome. It has action. It has adventure. It has drama. It has tension. It's a good time that shows the characters well. The only downside that I can see of this movie is it drags at time and it overstays its welcome. It's a 2-hour and 30-minute movie. There is no excuse for that. A lot of the core premise could be maintained and a lot of the character traits could be portrayed in such a simpler fashion that I'm going to put this still in A tier. It's just a minor inconvenience. Up next, The Chamber of Secrets. This movie had even more tension than the last one. It had even a stronger plot than the last one. And it introduced so much lore to the franchise. Horcruxes, Sword of Gryffindor, the houses, everything here is built in this movie. I have to put it in S tier. Even the mystery itself, the fact of trying to find this monster that turns out to be manipulated by Jenny is a whole red herring that pays off so well. Excellent writing, excellent foreshadowing, excellent payoff to the future series. It does the groundwork. It deserves an S tier for sure. I'm going to keep The Prisoner of Azkaban short. It also deserves an S tier, but for totally different reasons. This time, the plot is super weak. It is carried by the time traveling mechanic, and it really amounts to nothing in the series except for now we know that Harry Potter has a godfather, and now we know that Dumbledore is stupidly OP. But other than that, I think we can all agree that this plot is weak. It is just so well directed. Every frame in this movie demands your attention, and I respect that for it. It is a weak story, but a very polished movie. Has to go in S tier. Next movie, we got The Goblet of Fire. Here is an interesting one because it is lingered on non-stop action, right? Trial after trial. But it feels more like a high school sports movie, a coming of age story, rather than a whole franchise about wizards and Wizard Revolution. Maybe that's the point, I don't know. But at the end, Voldemort does make his return and Cedric does officially die. So this is the first time we see something of this magnitude happen in the Harry Potter series. I'm gonna go ahead and put this at a B because it is mindless fun, but it does nothing for the lore. It actually subtracts from the characters because Ron becomes intolerable, and it does nothing for the overarching story. I mean, yes, it brings back Voldemort, but it does it in such a laid-back way. The way I see it is this movie is 90% high school sports and 10% overarching story. You know you've done something wrong when high school is driving your story forward. B tier for sure. I wish I could put it higher, but I have to put it in B tier. Now we move on to The Order of the Phoenix. I hated this book and I hate this movie. I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but the main villain in this movie is a teacher. And I know before you say, yeah, she's played great and it's like a systemic sort of corporal kind of villain, more as she's a symbol of corruption rather than an actual person, that still doesn't excuse that this is about a high school teacher making life impossible for high school kids. And yeah, that's a universal idea that everybody can get behind, but it is not that strong of a premise to make a whole movie out of it. And we still have the problem that it does nothing for the lore, it does nothing for the characters that we already didn't know, it does nothing for the overarching story of the wizarding battle, the wizarding revolution. And again, at the last 10 minutes, that's when it gets good. That's when it reveals that Voldemort is alive. That's when the interesting part happens. But the back 90% of it was all filler about a teacher being mean to students, making life impossible for her classroom. Call me a cynic, but I'd want to watch a fantasy movie about war, not a fantasy movie about school. And I know we're talking about the movies, but in the book, they do this so much worse because it just gets dragged on way longer than this actual movie. If you think this movie is slow in terms of the classroom environment, in the book, they have like 2 chapters of Harry Potter in detention. It is unbearable. What this movie should have been was more of an action in the fight between Voldemort and Dumbledore and less about the teacher. But yet again, we have 90% setup, 10% payoff. Not a good ratio to have. I have to put this in D tier, and only because a lot of people respect it. I don't, but I'm making these videos to appease to my fellow Harry Potter addicts. Up next, we have Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. This is objectively the worst book to movie adaptation we had. Because, oh man, I hate going back to the books, but the book blows this movie out of the water. In the book, we have lore, we have setup, we have Voldemort's reasoning for being a villain. We have Dumbledore introduction to becoming a teacher. We have the setup, the mentality, and the rationale behind every Horcrux that Voldemort made. And in the movie, we focus on the relationships, the drama of the students. Which I know I just trashed the last 2 movies because of that. However, and this movie right here, this particular one gets an exception because, first of all, it's super cute and it's super dramatic. It gives you that high school angst that a lot of movies don't. Even the high school coming of age movies don't give you that. Secondly, it does give you enough of Voldemort's backstory to make this movie work. So when I said the other last 2 movies were 90% setup, 90% high school drama, 90% nonsense, and 10% payoff, this movie here is like 60% setup, 60% high school drama, 60% character development, and 40% lore, 40% backstory, 40% of the overarching plot, which is wizards versus humans. Maybe I'm coping, but I'm gonna put this in A tier. Plus, the Snape twist villain was awesome, and the payoff for that was even better. Coming second to last is The Deathly Hallows Part 1, and the same argument that I had before, I have it now. It is all set up, none of the payoff. It is basically a movie of finding the wand. Not strong enough to hang on its own, not a strong enough premise to develop a full movie about it, but it is necessary, and I hate that. Because the only thing worse than a slow burning movie is a slow burning movie without a proper payoff. And that is what Deathly Hallows Part 1 is. It is all build up for the wand, not enough payoff. Except that this whole movie is a build up to the next movie. It's just frustrating as a concept. I have to put this in D tier. Alrighty, the culmination of all the series, the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Every breadcrumb left by all the other movies was paid off in this single movie. We have the most action set pieces here, and we have the strongest character developments, especially when they're finding themselves in the wild. It's a fun ride, but its fault is the faults of every other movie before it. Its pacing, it is just such a slow burn. I get that hunting down these Horcruxes is supposed to be a long journey, and that is why it feels like such a slog to get through. However, it's a movie first and foremost. It should be entertaining. This is just a minor inconvenience. It gets a pass because it has the highest of highs in the whole franchise. I'm going to put this at A tier. It delivered on such a hype that we had, and that standard alone is impressive. Like, comment, and subscribe for more.